think it's quite hard to relate to a society that is that far back in time. Like, I'm assuming bloodshed and death was a daily occurrence back then. So it's hard to hold a lot of characters responsible for their actions. At the same time, it's quite hard to sympathise with them. I think Spartacus is starting to feel maybe he's gone a bit too far. In the season premiere, we get a hint from Spartacus that he doesn't really want all the power he now possesses. And in the last episode, we see guilt overcome Spartacus just for a moment when he sees all the innocent people that his army has killed. The whole point of this rebellion was to overthrow the Romans, not to murder the slaves as well. There's one scene where one of the Roman generals, Ennis, was about to burn down the grain stores of the city if Spartacus didn't call off the attack. Spartacus then convinces Leta, the wife of Ennis, to reason with the general and tell him that if he hands over the grain, their lives will be spared. Just when it looks like the negotiations are working, Gannicus and Crixus execute a surprise attack and kill the remaining Roman guards, and Spartacus kills Ennis in front of Leta. You could argue that this was probably necessary as it ensured the grain was protected, though it did look like Ennis was about to actually agree to Spartacus's terms. I think what the writers are trying to do is detach us a bit from Spartacus and his cause, preparing us for Spartacus's eventual downfall. It's a little bit like what's happening in Breaking Bad with Walter White, I think. And we're definitely seeing a more conflicted Spartacus than we've ever seen before, and it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. So we were also introduced to Julius Caesar last episode. I'm in two minds about his character at the moment on the show. Like, I don't know much about the historical evidence behind Julius Caesar, but when I saw him on Spartacus, I thought it was a bit unrealistic. Like, I think in my head I've just got the image of Kieran Hines as Julius Caesar in Rome, and the one of Spartacus just looks like a kind of badass Thor. Though after my first impression wore off, I came to the conclusion that maybe it is quite interesting and unpredictable to have a new and unique interpretation of Julius Caesar. One problem I heard a few people have with the show is that there's no historical evidence that Caesar was involved in Spartacus's rebellion, and this got me interested in the actual history behind the show, so I did some digging and I thought I might go over what is actually known about Spartacus. So after my extensive research, Spartacus was indeed a gladiator. He was from Thrace, which equates to southern Bulgaria in the present. He served for the Romans, but was then arrested and sold as a gladiator for some unknown offence. Spartacus was trained as a gladiator at the house of Lentus Batiatus until he and the rest of his slaves formed a rebellion and escaped. The leaders of the slave rebellion were thought to be Crixus and Animaeus, who were Gauls, Castus, who was a Roman, and Gannicus, who was a Celt, and of course Spartacus. So far exactly like the TV show. Most of the Roman army was engaged in war elsewhere, so it was up to Gaius Claudius Glaber to stop this uprising. Glaber surrounded Spartacus's camp at Mount Vesuvius, hoping that starvation would cause the slaves to surrender. But Spartacus surprised the Roman army by climbing down the mountain face using vines. They then went on to exterminate most of the Roman force. So again, pretty much exactly like the TV show. The wealthiest man in Rome, Marcus Crassus, was then appointed by the Senate to end Spartacus's rebellion. At this point, for some unknown reason, Spartacus and his army were moving south away from Rome. Crassus predicted that Spartacus would move back north, so he ordered 6 legions under the command of Mummius to move behind Spartacus's army. Apparently Crassus gave the instruction for Mummius to not engage in battle, but Mummius ignored this command and his 6 legions were defeated by Spartacus. Mummius is a character that hasn't appeared on the TV series yet. He's not a major character in Spartacus' story, so the writers might just show him as a generic Roman general that gets defeated. Or I'm thinking they might actually get Tiberius to play him, and then we'll see Tiberius actually dies at the hand of Spartacus just due to his arrogance and that he doesn't listen to his father Crassus. This would also make us sympathise with Crassus because his son has died, and maybe we'd even start rooting for Crassus over Spartacus when that happens. Anyway, Spartacus knows that he cannot defeat Crassus in open battle, so he makes a deal with pirates to transport his army to Sicily to recruit more slaves. The pirates take Spartacus's money but then betray him and sail off. Never trust a pirate. Apparently Crixus and Spartacus then had a disagreement on what action they should take next, and the slaves then broke into smaller independent fractions. Crixus then led his section of the army into open battle with Crassus, even though they were outnumbered and they got outmaneuvered, and this led to all of them being slaughtered. Spartacus tried to lead his followers to safety, but Pompey's army returning from Horn, Spain arrived to support Crassus. Crassus and Pompey were apparently political enemies, so Spartacus tried to strike a deal with Crassus, but he refused. Since Spartacus was surrounded, he was forced to fight the Romans in open battle, and they were also slaughtered. Apparently Pompey received the credit for the victory, even though he only came in at the end, and it was Crassus who did the achievement. So most of the Spartacus Blood and Sand, Vengeance, and War of the Damned seems to be based on actual facts. Obviously a few things would have been made up for entertainment purposes, but I'm still surprised how much they've actually stuck to historical events. After finding out about the history behind the show, it makes me a lot more excited about what is coming. I'm hoping Crixus and Spartacus do start a rivalry again like they did in Season 1. It would definitely make Crixus stand out a lot more as a character again. I'm also interested to see if the writers do decide to add Pompey to the storyline, or if they're just going to stick to Julius Caesar and Crassus. So it's true there is no evidence that Julius Caesar was involved in the war against Spartacus, though at the same time it's not implausible that it could have happened. Caesar and Crassus, they were really strong political allies not that long after Spartacus was defeated, so who knows, maybe on some level he could have been involved. I don't know, I wasn't there. But either way, I'm glad they did add Julius Caesar into the show, because it creates a lot more drama on the Roman side of things, especially since Crassus and Caesar, they don't always seem to get along. I'm going to watch episode 3 right now. You'll see the highlights of my reaction, then I'm going to do a review of episode 3 directly after I've watched it. So it's Men of Honor, here we go. Sorry, I watched it then I fell asleep, so I'm just going to do the review right now. So that was episode 3. Wow, it was a really good episode. I'll go as far to say it's one of the best Spartacus episodes yet. That's including season 1. The episode got off to a good start. Lugo had his first line, I think, of all of season 3, so we all love Lugo, so that was excellent. This episode was pretty dark, probably even darker than last episode, Wolves at the Gate. We see Spartacus and Agron are having a conversation about their limited food supply. Agron suggests that they should kill the remaining prisoners captured from last episode so that they have more food for themselves. The next scene was probably the best scene in this episode. All the prisoners minus Elayna are lined up in the city square. Nemetes, he's a bit of an ass, he's taunting one of the prisoners with a loaf of bread and says he'll give it to him in exchange for coin. The prisoner tells Nemetes that all his coin is held in a chest within his house, so Nemetes then throws the bread at him, but another prisoner jumps on it first. So it ends up the two prisoners fighting over the loaf of bread. So Crixus is the one who actually decides to stop all the commotion, but he then changes his mind and gives the two prisoners swords so they can fight for everyone's amusement. Gannicus and Attis seem to be the only two present that actually disagree with this, though Naevia says to them, how is this any different from when the Romans used to watch us fight to our death? So we then see one of the prisoners kill the other one. He reaches for the bread that they were originally fighting over, but Naevia stops him by slicing his hand. She claims that he was reaching for his sword, but it was quite obvious that he was reaching for the bread. So this gets Attis really angry because he used to be quite good acquaintances with this prisoner. And he ends up swearing at Naevia. Then Crixus gets really angry and pins Attis to the wall. I thought this was quite a scary scene because I thought it was going to end up with Gannicus and Crixus fighting, but luckily Gannicus is smarter than that. He's able to calm down Crixus without anyone else getting hurt. I really enjoyed this scene for two reasons. Firstly, it showed the lack of humanity of the men and women, since the restraints of society aren't holding them down anymore, and this is the first time that they've actually been in a comfortable enough situation to abuse their power. I also enjoyed this scene because of Crixus. I know he's not very likeable in it, but it's the first time we've seen this side of him since season 1. When Crixus and Naevia are finally alone, he asks her why she cut the prisoner. She responds by telling Crixus in detail about one time when she was tortured, and she says she'll get revenge on all Romans. So this is the first example in this episode where we see Naevia is a little bit disturbed. We were introduced to the pirates in this episode as well. It's complete coincidence that I was talking about them earlier. I had no clue that they would make an appearance this early in the season, but they look just as dodgy as I thought they would. The Pirate King tries to make a deal with Spartacus, in which Spartacus will receive supplies in exchange for coin. We're also introduced to Mummius. I said before that he's either going to be a generic Roman general or they're going to get Tiberius to fill in for his role. The writers have sort of done both. He is a generic Roman general, but instead of leading his own army, he takes orders directly from Tiberius. Spartacus asked Elayna to help with the negotiations involving the pirates. Spartacus killed her husband last episode, so she's still pretty pissed. But Spartacus promised to let her and the prisoners go if she helps. The pirates and Spartacus agree on an amount for the supplies, but the Pirate King requests to have Elayna in return for a reduction on the price. Spartacus outright refuses, and I think there may be a bit of romance between Spartacus and Elayna now, methinks. Spartacus then releases Elayna as promised. She tells him that he is not the man she expected him to be. I don't know why Spartacus doesn't release all the prisoners himself, but he gives Elayna the key to do it, and I'll come back to what happens with them next. Love is also in the air, with Sebo following Gannicus around everywhere. This is because last episode we saw that Gannicus saved her life when the city was being taken. This seems to be making Saxa a little bit jealous, but she then arranges for a threesome with all of them to take place anyway. Gannicus refuses to be involved in it, telling Saxa that Sebo is just a girl. It's obvious that Gannicus is hiding his true feelings for Sebo and is just trying to protect her. One of the pirates and Agron get into a fight over Nazir, which Spartacus then has to break up. Even though Agron punches him in the face like 15 times, the pirate seems to be alright, though I don't think this will be the last time we see Agron and pirate number 2, I'll call him, encounter each other. Crixus also repeatedly states that he doesn't trust the pirates. While Spartacus and his crew, including Crixus, Gannicus and Agron, go to outside the city to meet the pirates, Saxa notices that the prisoners have gone because Spartacus didn't tell anyone he was letting them go. Saxa then naturally assumes that the prisoners have escaped, then Naevia drastically assumed that it was Attis who let them go. She goes to confront him, they fight, and she kills him. Right, Naevia is a crazy bitch these days. Spartacus's men and the pirates are making their trade, only the pirates haven't held their end of the deal, never trust a pirate. So just when the slaves and the pirates are about to kill each other, Tiberius and his platoon attack both groups. If he had just waited a little bit longer, he would have considerably less people to fight. The pirate ships start firing missiles at the Romans. Mummius gets hit by one and burns alive. Tiberius's men retreat against his command, and Tiberius suffers an almost fatal stab wound, but he is carried to safety by his bum chum. The final scene shows Naevia explaining that Attius attacked her, so she defended herself. Almost everyone seemed to believe her, though I'm not sure Gannicus was convinced. We also see that Elayna successfully has hidden the prisoners in the barn. As I said, I really enjoyed this episode. I said in my last video that I had a problem with Crixus as a character, and that he doesn't bring anything to the show, but in this episode he stood out a lot more. Naevia is completely insane. We saw that last season she had some sort of, anxiety problem because of what the Romans had done to her, but I thought when she killed Asher that would have helped in some way, but now she is just completely irrational. I think Crixus knows this, but he's refusing to admit it. Instead of controlling her, he's actually supporting her actions. I think we're starting to see a rift developing between the characters. We definitely saw the evil sides of a few characters this episode, but at the same time we saw the good in others. Like for instance, we saw Gannicus would refuse to take part when the prisoners were fighting. We also saw later in the episode that Spartacus kept his word and he freed Elayna. The next episode is Decimation. It airs next Thursday, so make sure you watch it. Also make sure you don't miss Walking Dead. That starts again on Sunday the 10th. Revenge is also starting up on the same day for any of you that watch that. So anyway, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.
I am looking for free.